without further ado, I'm super excited to introduce the unicorn panel that will be moderated by Sophie Boulanger, that was the founder and co-founder of Bon Look. We have great panelists. Do we welcome them on this stage now, or no? That's good. Okay, so we have Sophie Boulanger from Bon Look, the moderator. We have Adrian Schauer from AlayaCare. Henri Machalani from Mistplay. And LP Maurice from Busbud. Guys, have fun.
Hello. It's working. Thank you, Malik. All right, super excited about this panel. I'm fired up and ready to go, and I hope you guys are as well. So hi, everyone. As Malik said, I'm Sophie Boulanger. It's a pleasure to be with you today. This panel is about what it really takes to build companies at scale, not just the highlights, but the decisions, trade-offs, and moments of doubt that shape the journey. We're here to talk about ambition, capital, leadership, and responsibility. And to be honest, let's hope about the parts of company building that we don't always put on stage. You'll hear from 3 founders who have built global businesses here in Canada and who are willing to share not just what worked, but what they learned along the way. Let me introduce you our 3 panelists. So Henri Machalani is the founder of Mistplay, one of Canada's most successful consumer tech company. He built Mistplay into a global gaming platform used by tens of millions of players worldwide, scaling it to hundreds of employees and over $300 million in annual revenue. After 6 years as CEO, Henri led a majority sale to private equity, retained a significant ownership stake, and continues to sit on the board as a long-term partner to the business. Today, through his family office, Machalani Ventures, he's actively investing in building in deep tech across AI, robotics, medtech, and biotech, bringing an operator's lens to the next generation of companies. LP Maurice. So LP is the co-founder and CEO of Busbud, a global mobility platform operating across more than 80 countries and serving millions of travelers every year. What started as an idea on a long bus ride in South America has grown into a category-defining company, combining a consumer marketplace and an AI-driven software platform for transportation operators worldwide. LP is a serial entrepreneur with over 20 years of experience building tech companies at a global scale, including earlier roles at Yahoo and LinkedIn in Silicon Valley. He brings a rare mix of product depth, operational discipline, and long-term ambition to company building. Last but not least, Adrian. So Adrian Schauer is the founder and CEO of AlayaCare, a global healthcare software company transforming how home care is delivered. Over the past decade, Adrian has scaled AlayaCare into a profitable international platform supporting millions of patients and caregivers across multiple countries, while navigating one of the most complex and regulated industries in tech. Adrian is also a serial entrepreneur. AlayaCare is his 3rd company, with 2 prior successful exits. He's also an active angel investor and board member, deeply committed to building enduring mission-driven companies from Canada. So let's join me in welcoming our 3 panelists. So we have about 40 minutes, but that includes a 10-minute Q&A, so please prepare your questions for later on. So we have about 30 minutes here together. I'd like to start by discussing ambition and national building. So a bit of your origin stories, because I think it's all very entertaining to hear. We had great discussions about this, how it started, and whether there was a moment early on when you were tempted to exit, And looking back, why did you keep building and doing it here in Canada? So maybe Henri, we start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. So, I started my company initially to get some financial freedom and travel the world. And then as the product started going viral, that's another story that I'll keep for another day. But product went viral. I was a solo founder at first, so I was programming by myself, doing marketing by myself, and eventually realized I needed a co-founder. So I reached out to my cousin's boyfriend, and he's in the room today, Eugene, and recruited it, convinced him to join me, and we were building it together. And as we were building it together, our ambitions grew. And I did participate in a program called Next Founder in Toronto, and I attended the program like for 3 days, and one thing that stuck was that Canadians tend to sell their businesses too early, specifically under $10 million at the time. And AJ, who was the teacher at UFT, he could kind of like convinced us that we have to go beyond that $10 million exit ambition and go for the like $100+ million ambition, the $1 billion+ ambition, and today maybe even the $1 trillion+ ambition. And so that kind of like motivated me quite a bit, and as the company kind of started getting more and more traction, our ambitions kept growing, and so we had an offer pretty early on in San Francisco. We were at a conference called Game Developer Conference, and we were kind of invited at the St. Regis's kind of like suite, and some Texas guy offered us a $10 million offer on the spot. So I was there with Eugene and my co-founder, and it was kind of like exciting, and it was like a holy shit moment. And
What size were you at that time?
we were only like, I think we were like 4 or 5 people in the company, and so it had only been 2 years since I quit my job at Microsoft to work on this, and so it was quick exit potentially, but we kind of like huddled and we said, no, you know what, this business has way more legs to run, and we're just getting started here. The momentum is strong, and we completely turned them down, and they were a competitor to be, and so they copied us and kind of like tried to compete with us, but they were never able to catch up and realize what we've built. So I'm really happy we said no that day, and I would encourage the same. I would kind of pass on this lesson that I've picked up, which is if you have an exit offer and it's been less than 5 years of working on the company, please call me or text me, and I'll encourage you not to sell and try going for that bigger exit, and ideally an IPO. Today, and kind of like today, I sold the majority part of my company to a US-based private equity firm. So now a US-based company controls my company. I still own 30% of that company, but I did this in 2021, and what's happening today with Donald Trump and like YC completely like backing out of Canada, I have a bit of like regret in that sense, where I would encourage entrepreneurs in this room to keep your company's control in Canada if you can, and try going for the IPO and become the acquirer. Try buying Canadian companies and keep them in Canada, and yeah, that's so. My company Mistplay is still in Canada, but that there's that kind of like hindsight that I'm like, I wish I maybe didn't do that. Yeah.
LP, love to hear your thoughts, because you're doing some M&A. You're actually the acquirer. So maybe tell us about your story and how you started buying competitors and consolidating.
Yeah, absolutely. So my story, a little bit like Henri, started as a side project. So I was just coming back from backpacking in Latin America for a few months, and had this idea when I was riding buses that this could be like improved on. and came back to Montreal. But my two co-founders at the time, they were actually working full-time elsewhere. So one actually worked at Microsoft, and the other one was finishing up his PhD in computer engineering at McGill, and he's also teaching there. So ultimately, like we were working nights and weekends, and with a little bit like you, wanting to make a little extra income to pay the rent, travel. But it's ironic, you travel less and you get less freedom as you start your company. So that's something that I picked up on. But ultimately, we kind of kept building, and a little bit like you also, there was some moments at the beginning where we found traction really quickly. So we put the first prototype of the marketplace online, and within weeks we had like tens of thousands of travelers around the world using it to find schedules that they never could find online, and writing us messages that they were so happy that this was easier now. So it was very like inspiring, and we were also like, you know, wanting to kind of continue to build on our own terms. At the same time, as the sort of supply and demand connected, some larger folks in our industry came to see us, a little bit like Henri. It was not in a hotel room, thank God, but with offers, you know, this was in the first few years of the company, between 10 million and about 100 million to sell the business to them right away. And it is very tempting, like Henri mentioned, just to sell it very early because you have a lot of equity stake, you're not very diluted, so there's a lot of upside there to do that. But myself and my co-founders were pretty convinced that we wanted to build here in Canada. So we kind of doubled down, worked out of my basement on the plateau, hired a lot of people from McGill that were in sort of my co-founders network, and then eventually kind of really focused on building and scaling and taking it to the next level rather than selling it early. But it is a journey, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit later.
What about you, Adrian? And it was your third company in your case. So maybe tell us a bit what you did with your first two companies, and then how you approach AlayaCare.
Yeah, so I'm going to give, you know, the advice I give, having not done the thing I'm about to advise on, probably has some asterisks beside it. But so AlayaCare is 11 years old now, and I'm trying to build a 100-plus year company. This is the company of my life now. I want there to be an AlayaCare in 100 years. But my entrepreneurial journey started 22 years ago, you know, in the basement as a 24-year-old, kind of bootstrapped that business. And then that had a 7-figure exit. And then the next business had an 8-figure exit. And when I founded AlayaCare, the idea was, okay, well, let's do it again. I'm a serial entrepreneur. Let's go for the 9-figure exit. And then I got 5 years into it, and, you know, arguably, we kind of got to that level. But I realized that I love this business. I think the impact just goes up from here. Why would I want to start again? And whereas we really, bootstrapped the first one, deployed some of the capital from the first sale into the second one, but no real outside capital. With the third one, you know, with AlayaCare, my mentality was I'm not gonna let the opportunity, the biggest opportunity I can imagine, not be realized for want of capital. So we've raised a fair amount of capital this time.
So that's the perfect segue, actually, to start talking about scaling lessons learned. You know, as your company scaled, how did fundraising change? And you all have a very different story, because I think, Henri, I don't want to steal the punch, but you raised less than $1 million of capital before selling. So that will be interested to hear your thoughts on how you built. But so how did later stage capital reshape your team, your dynamics, the governance, also the sense of control that you have over the business? So maybe LP, you can start, and since I know you've raised up to Series D, I think up till now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think today in Canada, you can start and go from seed all the way to Series D, or even beyond that, you know, here with Canadian investors. I think we're the proof of it. And I think also on your end, you've raised, you know, a lot of capital. So I think if you have that conviction that you are in front of a global opportunity, like you seem to be, and like we also are really convicted of that, I think there's a way to raise here. But also at some point, though, when you get to kind of Series D and beyond, I think you also may want to put the periscope and look at like what's happening globally. Because if you're raising 100 million or several hundred million, at some point there might be US investors or international investors that might make sense. And in the last year or so, we've started to do that on our side. As Sophie mentioned, we've acquired 5 businesses already in the last few years, and we want to acquire more. So essentially in the last year or so, we've completed a financing that was over $50 million from a US investor. And we've also added some investors from Europe, from Asia, from LATAM. There could be strategic investors or financial investors. And we found that to be a really nice complement that really has brought in new opportunities, new relationships, and really kind of new possibilities for the company, because as we see ourselves increasingly as a kind of a global market leader, we wanted the cap table to reflect that and to have really connectivity into a lot of different markets, whether it's India, Mexico, like parts of the world that we were not connected naturally here. And I think having some investors in those regions has helped a lot.
And any recommendation or learnings you may have about building your cap table well early on? And I'm sure I'll be interested to hear as well, Adrian, because it's your 3rd business. But often we see very messy cap tables early on, and it's something that a lot of first-time founders are not well coached on. They let go a lot of equity at the beginning, and then they just have, a lot of people on the cap table. Like, what are your key recommendations and learnings, I guess, that you would have?
Just quickly, I'd love to hear yours also. I think one is that if you can put yourself in a position where you don't necessarily need to be raising, I think that will help you get better outcomes. So that was mentioned on the student panel earlier. I think it's great advice. And also just talk to people who've done it. Mentors in the city who've raised $50, $100, $200 million, and they have a lot of lessons to share, just in terms of how to build at the earlier stages, so that if you want to go the whole way, like 5 or 10 or 15 or even 100 years, you won't regret sort of the first kind of few deals that you've done on the financing side.
Yeah, I just want to touch on the economic nationalism as well. Our cap table is 92% Canadian. I'm very proud of that. Inovia has been an amazing partner with us. La Caisse, the CDPQ, and Investissement Québec have been amazing partners to us. CIBC on the banking front, who are all in the room today. And the other thing I would say, there is sometimes a temptation for the sake of ego to get a big headline number and then put some structure on your cap table. I think that's almost always a mistake. We've always just had a very clean last money in, first money out type cap table. Now, what I will say is we're now looking at a very big acquisition of our largest competitor in the US, where we've more or less tapped out the Canadian capital partner system. And so we are talking to US PEs, but there are actually a lot of European PEs that are looking to back this transaction. So I think it's a very globalized world for capital.
Henri, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, so you obviously refused that 10 million acquisition offer, but growing Mistplay, did you consider taking on capital? What sort of capital did you take in, and how did you manage to grow on your own?
So when I was building Mistplay, I had a very old school mindset of raise as least as possible, maximize control, and give as much equity as you can to your team instead of investors. So what we did to bootstrap for so long, so we raised $500,000 Canadian total, and the way we did that was by initially taking no salary. My co-founder and I took no salary I took no salary for 2 years, and he took no salary for 1 year, and then we paid ourselves $48,000 for a while. So we kind of lived in a very scrappy way, and we did the same thing for our early founding engineers. So we were paying half market price, but we were giving a lot of equity. So my philosophy was, instead of giving the equity to investors and then paying big salaries, give a lot of equity to my founding team, pay lower salaries, look for people that are willing to take that risk financially and that could. And it ended up working out. We minted a lot of millionaires at the secondary sale. and we have a few companies being started now from ex-misplayers, I guess. So yeah, the cap table was very clean. It was just like when we did a secondary sale, we had 60 shareholders, was all the whole company. Like even the customer support person had equity. So my rule was everyone gets equity, no matter what you're doing. As long as you're full-time, you're getting equity. And so I encourage that for people in the room as well. It keeps people motivated. They feel part of the story, part of the team. They'll work those extra hours that you need to win and succeed.
I'd like to know, as you scale Adrian, the evolution of your role. So you have now over 1,000 employees, 1,500?
Oh, no, we're 600.
600, okay. But still a lot of people in, I think, Canada, US, and Australia, if I'm not mistaken. So, like, what changed most in your day-to-day role as a CEO, and any hiring mistakes you did, hiring too fast, not fast enough, and kind of lessons learned while scaling?
Yeah, I mean, I take very seriously this idea that CEOs should be T-shaped. So you want to have a broad overview of your business, but then you want to go deep all the way to the coal face, right? Which is typically where the customer meets your offering, and don't allow too much filtering between that front line of where your offering hits and your perspective. So I do a lot of that. I'm sure sometimes it annoys my team, but I'm allergic to filtering problems, so I like to be out there. We at various stages, we'd hit some new threshold. We clearly were not at the level of organization we needed to be for that scale. And then at times we've brought people in from outside, and it's worked. And at times we've brought people in from the outside, and it hasn't. I really value stability on my leadership team. So, you hear some of the unicorns that just churn, different C-level in every role every 2 years. I've tried to not build that way. But yeah, I would definitely encourage people to be skeptical about the pedigree of someone who succeeded at a large company being a transferable skill set. I think people who have succeeded on a through the stage of a company that grew to scale, that's a much better signal of future success than someone who succeeded at a big enterprise.
Yeah, I totally agree about sometimes a shiny CV, or someone who has worked in a very large organization has a hard time adapting to a smaller org, and vice versa, I guess. So what about you, LP?
Yeah, if we rewind to the early years, I was really doing a lot of sort of menial tasks, including, like, for example, doing customer support on my personal cell phone number. So sometimes I could do hundreds of calls per day from people wanting to reissue their ticket or something like that. And at some point, one of our advisors just pulled me to the side, and he said, like, hey, this was some of the best advice that I got earlier on. Like, you need to work, like, on the business, not just in the business. And I totally agree with your kind of T-shaped analogy, but I was probably too far down into the T. And he really kind of advised that I kind of go back up. And he told me there's really 3 things that matter when you're scaling. And one is money and the capital strategy and making sure you don't run out of money. The second one is about people and making sure you have the very best talent in all the positions and building culture for those folks. And the third one is really around setting strategy for the group. Right, so what's the vision, what's the roadmap, and making sure everyone is aligned. And he's like, when you're doing customer support on your phone, you're doing neither of those 3 things, right? So you really need to kind of bubble up a layer. But I do believe also that's a potential trap if you stay too high. And oftentimes I find myself wanting to go back in founder mode and just really kind of go deep on a problem, whether it's product or commercial strategy or whatnot. Yeah, and I think over time you learn the lessons around building the team and what your role should be. I feel like my role is evolving every year. I'm doing new things, and I'm no longer the chief doer. I'm maybe the chief context setter to allow the team to have leverage and do many more things. And we've hired executives from different places. When you get access to resources, you can basically hire for any company in the world. The best of the best executives from the best of the best companies. And when we were kind of growing up as a company, the companies that we respected were like, Booking.com, in terms of like how they would A/B test stuff. And we're like, if we just had one scientist from their organization, right? And then like Airbnb, how they built their brand, for their marketplace at scale. So we started hiring from those places, and I think that brought a lot of interesting things, because we did have a bit of an imposter syndrome sometimes, and sometimes we have this in Canada where we felt like maybe there's a bit of an industry knowledge gap, that there is like, maybe there's a seasoned manager gap that we don't feel like we're able to do it ourselves, so let's bring in some folks. But I think there's really got to be careful about the mix and making sure you're not like bringing in too many external people too quickly, and you're also hiring and promoting and giving equity to people that have been working with you along your sides, entrepreneurially inside of the business. So just getting that balance right is something that has taken time, but I think now we've really achieved it.
So is the question how our role evolved over time?
Yeah, so
Okay.
I'd look, and you haven't told the story, but you told me the story, when you scaled from, I think you had 1,000 users, and then in a day, all of a sudden you had 65,000 users,
Yeah.
and then now you have 50 million users. So as you scaled very rapidly the company, having this technical background and probably the impulse to always go back and just like be in the tech aspect of the business, how did you manage to evolve and raise at a more strategic level?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so my background is software engineering. So I'm a programmer. Kind of worked in product management at Microsoft. So I had that background coming into the company. So naturally, I gravitated towards that. As Sophie said, I started by programming the product, then kind of like switched over to marketing. I did a lot of influencer outreach. I tried everything. I used the bullseye technique. Recommend a book called Traction. And so tried all of the marketing channels I could try and I could afford to try, including influencer marketing. For us, influencer marketing ended up working. But I nearly gave up. After 3 months of cold outreach to influencers, everyone was shutting me down. At some point, some guy said yes, launched a YouTube video, didn't work, had a little bit of users from that, spent way more on the video than we got users. I'm literally now in Toronto pitching investors on a completely different idea, about to give up on the project. And I got lucky because I had launched a YouTube campaign with an influencer, and the title of the video matched perfectly with an event that was happening globally. So the SEO was just perfect for that video, and it went viral. And I went from, well, I say we, but it was just me. So I went from 1,000 users to 65,000 users in a single kind of like moment. And my phone was just ringing with AWS warnings saying my DynamoDB database was just unresponsive because I didn't give enough capacity at the time. So it took me time to figure that out. And so I went to Starbucks at like 7 a.m. trying to debug, and I was completely stressed, freaking out for 12 hours, kind of like coding in Starbucks by myself. And then it hit me, and I'm like, I need a co-founder because I have to manage this influencer who's yelling at me because my server isn't working. I have to manage the gaming companies because we have a B2B aspect of the business where we close kind of like contracts with gaming companies. So I had to manage the sales aspect, and then I had to fix the bug. And so it was just and then the customer support at the same time. So that's when I reached out to Eugene. And the first thing I did when I convinced Eugene to join me, my co-founder, was, all right, Eugene, you're going to take half of the responsibility. You're going to take sales and marketing, and I'll do product, I'll do engineering, I'll do the AI side, and the design UX UI. And that was an amazing separation because he was so good at salesmanship and just people skills in general. And so he excelled really well at kind of like talking to influencers and going to conferences, closing deals. And it allowed me to focus on, again, programming. So built up the team a bit. We got 1 programmer and then 2 programmers. And so for the first 2 years and a half, I was still coding. And then at some point, we were like, I think 13 people, 14 people. And then I was like, okay, I need to move away from programming because I had so many one-on-ones and I was, just like talking to clients. The clients wanted to meet with the CEO sometimes, and so I focused more on product. So I was still the kind of like CTO and kind of like CPO, where I was driving the product vision for the entirety of the company, and I was still kind of like reviewing all the dev specs and the like the architecture of the code, and I was even doing PRs and stuff like that. So I tried to stay as involved and as hands-on as I can, as long as I can, until we got acquired. And then when we got acquired, I still would do like I would do celebrity hackathons where I would like show up with the programmers and kind of like code for a week with them full time just to increase morale. Sometimes it would help, I found. But yeah, my role shifted towards managing investor expectation once we got acquired, and then building the ELT, the executive leadership team, recruiting from the top companies, and then kind of like coalescing the board, coalescing the executive leadership team, managing the board in a way I had to like present to the board kind of like our revenue and all that stuff, budget. So the role really shifted towards that, and I personally found it more exciting in the early days. So I would, whoever is in the early days of their company, enjoy it because it's the funnest time in a startup. And you know, when you're really big, it's a lot more political, and it becomes a bit of a politician role in a way. And it's not for everyone. So some people, like me, decide to eventually step down and move on to more early stage companies because that's what they enjoy. So it depends what you like. That's my
amazing. Thanks. I just want to take a few more minutes of the panel before we go to questions, because I'd love to hear, you know, any anecdotes or stories about, was there a moment when the company nearly derailed, maybe some COVID horror stories in the travel industry? And how did that experience really change you as a leader and your sense of responsibility at scale when you have all those employees that rely on you? So I don't know, Adrian, if you want to start.
Sure, I can start, but the near-death experience of a travel company during COVID, I think LP is going to win this one for most interesting story. I mean, in our first 6 years, basically at least once every 18 months, I would go to sleep at night wondering whether we'd be able to make it through the next quarter. And it would come in cycles. Probably the most cringeworthy incident was, we were 3 years into the business. We had maybe 30 customers. And we decided, you know what, we're going to have a user conference. And so we, Bob Gainey was an angel investor in the business. We're like, cool, we have our celebrity. We booked a shitty hotel in Niagara Falls. We launched a user conference. We had 70 customers there, and we were maybe 10 employees at the time. I guess this was year 2. One mobile dev who knew how to compile our mobile app. So 2 days before the user conference, he puts out a new version and then goes scuba diving in the Caribbean. And this is like, anyway, so there was an offline mode, like retry scheme, if you tried to submit a form, and there was an issue where the form was successfully submitted, but the message that came back was like no, and it would trigger a retry scheme. And so we started the user conference, and then, you know, we're getting pings like ours. So servers can't keep up. What's going on? Basically, we turned every mobile user into like a distributed denial of service attack on the business. And we couldn't get through to my cousin, who was our mobile dev, who was, you know, in the Caribbean. So we pulled off this user conference while the app was going down. It was pre-AWS in Canada. We were trying to get our co-location to facility to plug in some servers for us. So yeah, there's just so many things. Like, we did not deserve to make it this far, but we did.
Wow. So in terms of COVID, obviously in your travel industry, that was brutal. So we lost, just to give you an idea, about 95% of our sales that we had built over almost a decade in 6 weeks. I would not wish this to anyone. That said, I kind of want to wish this kind of obstacle to some of you because you do come out stronger on the other side as a founder, and it really is a test for your team. So I would say like really kind of big hats off to our team, our investors who believe through it, also our partners, you know, a lot of the bus companies that we work with, everyone was sort of locking elbows and say, we're going to get through this together. But it's very disheartening to work on a product for like, you know, more than a decade and have to put a literally like 72-point font on your website, the homepage, like stay at home, like don't travel, like do not do the thing that we are in business to do, right? It was very, very difficult, just mentally, but I think what we did was take a step back and use a little bit of this downtime. So this was not a moment where like all the servers were on fire or something like that. So we can really think about what we wanted to do for the next 3 years of the business. And what we did was we actually wrote a strategic plan, which we had never done that before for like 3 years. So we decided to become an acquirer, stay in Canada, build in Canada, but acquire other companies in other countries. We decided to be a better partner with our bus operators, so actually build software, like AI-driven software to manage all of their operations, which is kind of a completely new business line for us. And we made all these decisions to kind of push the idea of our business to the max impact that it could have potentially. And out of that, you know, with the help of our team, you know, nothing was perfect through it, but we really kind of pushed and locked elbows, and we grew 11x from 2021 to 2024, which was the 3 years kind of consecutive to COVID.
Bravo.
So yeah, that was a good test.
And what about you? I guess COVID was actually an accelerator for the business and created all sorts of issues as well of growth.
Yeah, it was. How did you know that? That's a good insight. But yeah. COVID helped us. People were inside playing video games. Really, it was crazy times for us because we were all locked in, working for like 10 hours a day on, you know, in your little office at home on your screen. Personally, as an entrepreneur, it wasn't fun, to be honest, because what I love about the entrepreneurial experience is building a community of people that are coming together in person and building something, and that energy you get from just being around really motivated and talented people is why I loved entrepreneurship so much. And the whole remote work, kind of like forced remote work experience was really difficult. We were growing, so that was awesome, but it wasn't fun because I was looking at screens and that wasn't the vibe I liked, honestly. In terms of like, to answer your question on like the scariest moment, there was so many moments where I thought we were gonna die, and I was just sleeping in bed saying, okay, at least I have my girlfriend if everything
I think
fails.
entrepreneurs that don't admit that they've thought they were not going to make payroll in like a month, or like,
yeah.
If you've grown a successful company and you say it never happened to you, I think you're lying.
Exactly.
Because I think it happened to everyone. So yeah.
Exactly. Especially when you're bootstrapped, you don't have a lot of reserves. You're kind of like always on the brink of not paying payroll. But the last or latest scary story that I have to share is we were in the process of selling a majority stake of the company to a private equity firm in New York. They were doing due diligence, and this was like Goldman Sachs people, so they were very aggressive on due diligence, and they were looking at every single kind of like number, breaking down the business in atoms and rebuilding it completely. So they knew everything that was going on, and while they were doing due diligence, we had a bot farm attack on our servers, and they were creating fake accounts, completely skewing all of our analytics, and we were at first puzzled because we had a fraud prevention team that was supposed to detect and block this, but the bot farm was so smart that it kind of like bypassed our own AI, and so we were at first puzzled, but then we figured it out in the middle of due diligence, and then we had to come tell the acquirer, like, all right, here's what's happening. There's a bot farm. It's skewing our data. Our data looks better than it is, because there's like a spike of traffic, right? So here's what's going to happen. We're going to implement the following measures. It's going to cut our traffic in half. Don't be scared, because once we clean that up, we're going to scale everything back up, and in 1 month we'll be higher than we were with the bots. And we were lucky because this PE firm had invested in bot prevention companies, so they knew very well the existence of bots, and it's a big problem in the industry in every consumer mobile app. And so they were smart, they were patient, and they waited, basically. And we delivered exactly what we said. Like a month later, like a week later, our traffic cut by 60%, which was very scary. And then we focused. The team was laser focused. We had war room meetings every day, and then we brought the traffic back up to like higher than it was with the bots. And then a week after that, they flew from New York and begged us to sign on the spot because they were scared that our traffic would keep shooting up and our valuation would go up. So that was that was a good moment.
Amazing. We just have 4 minutes left, so we want to open up the floor for questions. I don't know if there's someone with a microphone.
Did the girlfriend stick around, or Henri?
She didn't. It was very sad.
Good stuff.
Any questions for panelists? Yes.
Well, first, thanks for the transparency and congrats on the resiliency. It's impressive and always fun to hear from you guys. If you could go back in time, or if you would start again, what would you wish you have done or you would do differently?
Like if we're 20 years old today? Yeah? Well, today is a very interesting moment because of, as the previous panelist said, vibe coding has changed the game a bit. It kind of commoditized software engineering, and it's going to get worse, I guess, for software people, unfortunately. So as an investor, I'm now kind of like investing a lot in startups. I'm investing in a lot of like hardware companies and like biotech, medtech, things with moats, like regulatory moats, and that are hard for AI to generate. So that's kind of what I'm focused on. So if I was 20 today, I would go all in on digital biology. I think that's the most exciting frontier that's coming. Programmable cells, yeah.
Personally, just to answer that also, like, I think there would be a lot of desire to just tinker around with AI and just play around with it full time, like 9 to 9, not sleep. Like recently inside of the company, for all of our 300 employees, we ran this 1 month AI sprint where we stopped all business as usual and just focused on working with AI tools. And we made all AI tools available, gave classes, and just let people build demos. And it was like astonishing just to see what came out of 24, 48 hour kind of sprints. It was really, really incredible. So to build companies with those tools is something that would be super fun. But beyond that, I think I would ask myself, if I was 20, like, what am I passionate about? Imagine if there's 3 or 4 big themes that you're passionate about, whether it's fitness or fashion or whatever. I know for myself, my themes or my hashtags would be like probably travel, for sure. International, I really like that component of the business. Maybe social impact, having like an impact at scale to like net positive in the world. And maybe like a data-rich type of business. So I'd be looking for an opportunity that has some of those, at least 1 or 2 of those themes. So I think it's a good question to ask yourself, like, what are those themes that you are passionate about that would make you kind of work on a project almost for free? And if you can connect the dots and find something like that, just stick with it. And you might want to build a 100-year company, like Adrian said. So I think that's a super great use of your life if you can combine a lot of your passions and make something useful for the world.
Yeah, I think well said, right? If you fall in love with a problem, there's never been a better era in human history to solve problems. And then, yeah, you just have to think of the moat as not being the feature function of the thing you built in software, which is going to be hard for someone else to build. I think that era is coming to an end. But but there are lots of amazing problems that can be solved now that couldn't even have been solved a few years ago.
Perfect timing. We're at 0 for our time. So thank you very much. It was very insightful.
Thank you, Sophie.
Sophie.
Yeah.
Thank you.